Dr. Umar Johnson is once again at the center of a storm, and this time it is louder, messier, and filled with more receipts than ever before. For years, his name has been tied to the dream of building a school, the Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey Academy, known as FDMG. It was supposed to be the crown jewel of his legacy, the project that would finally prove that independent Black institutions could thrive without government involvement. But today, that dream looks less like an inspiring mission and more like a never-ending scam, and the person who has dragged all the details into the light is none other than Tasha K. Tasha K did not just throw shade this time. She came with paperwork, timelines, and voices of women who once stood by Umar but are now exposing him for who they claim he truly is. She broke down IRS filings, donation numbers, property records, and testimonies so damaging that even Umar's most loyal followers are finding it hard to defend him. And as the dust settles, one thing is becoming clear: the FDMG Academy is no longer seen as a project of hope. It is being called by many nothing more than a money pit. A bottomless cycle of fundraising with no finished product in sight. Let's go back to the beginning. Over a decade ago, Umar Johnson began raising funds for what he promised would be a safe haven for young Black boys. He told the community that the system was failing their children, that public schools were not designed to uplift them, and that the only way forward was to build something for themselves. His words were powerful. He spoke with passion, rhythm, and the kind of charisma that made people believe. Mothers desperate for better futures for their sons held on to his every word. People across the country donated to what they thought was a noble cause. And with every fiery speech, Umar painted himself as the Prince of Pan-Africanism, the one who would carry Marcus Garvey's vision into the modern day. But here we are, nearly 15 years later, and the reality looks completely different. According to nonprofit filings, Umar reported raising just over $634,000 as of 2024. Yet critics believe that number doesn't tell the full story. Evidence from PayPal, GoFundMe, Cash App, and his speaking fees suggests that he may have raised far more, some say up to $1 million or even beyond. So the question is, if the money came in, where did it go? That is where Tasha K stepped in, breaking it all down. She didn't mince words. Fam, the money gone. That one line has gone viral, turning into a slogan that even Umar's former supporters now repeat with anger and frustration. For them, that phrase sums up everything: years of hope. Thousands of dollars donated. And nothing to show for it but empty buildings and excuses. One of the most painful parts of this saga is the way Umar allegedly targeted single mothers. Tasha highlighted how his strategy wasn't just about fiery speeches, it was about emotional manipulation. He would repeat slogans like "our children, our future" until people felt guilty for not giving. Just like when you hear a song you don't like but it gets stuck in your head, Umar's words dug deep into people's emotions. And the ones who were hit hardest were often mothers desperate to find opportunities for their sons. They gave their money because they believed they were investing in their children's future. But what they got in return, critics say, was empty promises. And then there are the women. This is not just a story about finances, it is also a story about alleged personal scandals that have followed Umar for years. Back in 2015, the conscious stripper story broke, and people began questioning whether he was truly living the life he preached about. That scandal was brushed off by some as a distraction, but it planted seeds of doubt. Over time, more women began speaking out, saying they were drawn in by Umar's promises only to be left humiliated. Women like Shawan Stone revealed deeply personal stories, accusing him of insults, manipulation, and failed relationships. She claimed Umar called her names like fishy coochie and throat goat after things went wrong between them. Others said he lived with his mother, relied on her benefits, and presented himself as a leader while struggling privately. Tasha K gave these women a platform, and once their voices were amplified, whispers turned into a roar. Suddenly, Umar wasn't just the fiery speaker on stage. He was being painted as a man who allegedly preyed on women's trust, used his influence for personal gain, and left a trail of broken promises behind him. But let's get back to the finances, because that's where the receipts cut the deepest. The IRS Form 990 filings paint one picture: $321,000 in reported contributions over 5 years. But when you add up PayPal transfers, GoFundMe donations, speaking fees, and direct contributions, critics argue the real amount raised could be between $1.6 million and several $1 million. If that's true, where did it all go? Umar has shown off the Delaware school buildings he purchased in 2019 as proof that the money was working. But those buildings remain unopened years later, still vacant and facing back taxes, unpaid fees, and liens. Reports say the property registration fees alone piled up to over $15,000, delinquent for years. On top of that, there were unpaid water bills, civil penalties, and more than $76,000 in back taxes. Liens were even placed on the property in 2020, raising fears that the school could eventually be auctioned off. Yet Umar continued to appear online, often going live in front of the empty buildings, standing silently, or showing off new jackets instead of directly addressing the growing concerns. Supporters saw these live streams as symbolic. Critics saw them as pure performance art, distractions to keep the donations flowing. The gap between the fiery speeches and the silent live streams has become almost comical. Umar calls out, "My Baltimore Africans" or "My Kansas City Africans," hyping up his audiences, while the reality behind him is a vacant, lifeless property. Tasha roasted this contrast, mocking how his energy and speeches never translated into actual results on the ground. And while supporters argue that renovations take time and money, critics are asking how many years and how many millions it takes before even one classroom opens its doors. Tasha did not stop at the financials. She also dragged Umar for attaching his legacy to giants like Marcus Garvey and Frederick Douglass. He has long claimed to be related to Douglass, but the Douglass family themselves denied any connection. That revelation exposed another layer of myth. Tasha did not hold back. She said Frederick Douglass is probably rolling in his grave, watching his name get dragged into this mess. Too many. It feels like cultural betrayal. The community believed in Umar's dream because he tied it to these legendary figures. But instead of building a school, critics say he has built a brand of speeches, donations, and stalling tactics. And while this drama explodes online, the legal shadow is growing. Tasha speculated that Umar could be facing serious legal risks, including the possibility of wire fraud, since so much of his fundraising happened digitally through PayPal, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Every dollar leaves a digital trail. Unlike the community, the federal government does not forget. Tasha warned that if investigators dig deep, they could uncover a case that looks less like a failed project and more like a deliberate scam. The internet wasted no time roasting Umar. Memes flooded social media, poking fun at his repeated excuses for delays. One year it was HVAC problems, the next it was painting, then it was electrical wiring. The reasons kept changing, but the outcome stayed the same. The school never opened. Instead, Umar hosted barbecues and cultural events on the empty property, trying to frame them as signs of progress. But when you strip away the events and the speeches, the reality is still the same. The buildings are shells. And then there's the pattern with women. This is what stings the most for many supporters. Women who once believed they were helping Umar build a future for black boys are now saying they were manipulated. Some say they were promised love or commitment in exchange for their loyalty, only to end up embarrassed and discarded. The conscious stripper scandal was only the beginning. Over and over again, women have come forward to say that Umar's private life looks nothing like the image he presents on stage. Instead of a strong leader, they describe a man who allegedly depends on women's support, manipulates their loyalty, and shifts blame when things fall apart. Even his professional credentials have been questioned. For years, Umar presented himself as a licensed psychologist, but according to records, his license was challenged in 2018, and he later admitted he only held a certificate. Tasha tore this apart with humor, saying, "A certificate in psychology doesn't make you a doctor, just like a certificate in journalism doesn't make me Oprah." That shade cut deep because it struck at the very core of Umar's idea that he is more qualified than others to lead and teach. Now the community is divided. On one side are Umar's diehard supporters, who say this is just another attempt to tear down a black man with a vision. They argue that building a school without government support was always going to take decades. On the other side are critics who say that 15 years of fundraising with no results cannot be explained away as a process. They believe it is not about tearing down anyone, but about demanding accountability. The most haunting part of all of this is the silence of the boys. After all these years, after all these donations, there are no students, no classrooms, no programs to show. The very children Umar claimed to fight for are nowhere in this story. And that silence speaks louder than any of his speeches ever could. The internet now chants one phrase whenever Umar goes live: "Fam, the money gone." That viral slogan has become more than just a joke. It's a verdict. It's the community saying enough is enough.